Welcome to the Freelance Drive. Here we talk with skilled freelancers about their professional journey. Stay tuned for real-life experiences to learn and actionable steps to take to improve your freelancing career. My name is Yuri. I'm a community builder at Code Control and 9am.works, and my guest is Elaine Pofeldt, an independent journalist, content strategist, writer, and author of two game-changing books for freelancers and entrepreneurs, The $1 Million One-Person Business and Tiny Business Big Money. And today we'll discuss what steps to take for freelancers to effectively grow their $1 million business while doing it solo. So welcome, Elaine.
Thank you so much, Yuri. It's great to be here.
I'm super happy to talk to you. And as I mentioned, someone on this podcast referred me your book. That's how I get to know about you. I will definitely find this person and share it with you. But for now, let's start with this first question. What inspired you to write the $1 Million One-Person Business and Tiny Business Big Money?
Well, the $1 Million One-Person Business came out of my own experiences as a freelancer. I found that there really wasn't a manual for people as to how to live the independent life as a one-person business. And there were a lot of struggles. And so I got interested in learning about people who were succeeding at this and more, who were in the top 1% of success for doing this. And then I came across some statistics from the US Census Bureau about businesses that were in the seven figures. In the US, they're called non-employer businesses, meaning they don't run payroll. They're not employers. And I found that across all different industries, people were getting to 1 million and beyond. And I started writing about it to try to find out more about what they were doing because nothing was being published about it. And gradually, I built up a library of case studies in my column on Forbes, and that eventually led to the book. And Tiny Business Big Money is the sequel, where I look at how do you keep the great things about the one-person business as you start to build a more formal team, whether it's a team of freelancers that are supporting you, or maybe you hire your first employee, a virtual assistant. How do you keep the magic and the freedom of the one-person business as you scale up? And also, what industries can you do it in? I did a lot of digging into the ones that require a very small team but bring big rewards. And so the appendices in Tiny Business Big Money share the results of what some of those businesses are. And you wouldn't believe what some of them are. For instance, for less than 5 employees, Butter Creameries is the number 2. The reason I'm not giving you the number 1 is it was casinos. I think it's Riverboat Casinos. I'm not going to recommend that one because that might be a hard one to get into. It's a highly regulated industry. Plus, some people have moral issues with it. But the Butter Creameries was number 2. So it's important to be creative in your digging to find your opportunity.
You know, it's interesting. I recently saw some channel on TikTok and talking about not usual business ideas. And there are some crazy ideas. Like some people just creating something that people are not even thinking about and they're just selling it. I'm like, how can you do this? Like, how is your mind working? So, and still, you know, what I learned from people I'm talking to, like many freelancers live from one project to another. And they always have this, you know, feast or famine cycle. And if they can't find the next job in like nearest 3 months, sometimes they have to return to a 9 to 5 job, which is not bad, but still. So I'm wondering, since you were learning so many entrepreneurs and you've been on your journey by yourself, like personally, I'm curious, what are successful solopreneurs doing differently?
Well, one thing is they are consistent. There are a lot of people that describe themselves as solopreneurs, but to be honest, they're making a half-hearted effort. They're not showing up for their business every day. I don't believe that you have to sit there toiling away for 10 hours a day, but you do need to do one meaningful thing every workday to keep moving forward. And I would say that is the number one differentiator. It sounds simple, and it is simple, but it isn't easy. But that's what I see. The other thing is that they develop a thick skin because there's a lot of rejection as a freelancer, and you have to put a lot of things out there to see what sticks. You know, maybe you have a new offering for an ebook or a course, or an article idea, you put it out there and 100 people might reject it. What differentiates the ones who get to 1 million is they keep putting it out there and they realize that one person's rejection is just that, one person's rejection. It doesn't mean they're the ultimate judge and jury on your ideas and your capabilities. So I would say they take ownership of their own career and they don't let one no derail them. They just feel like, okay, that's just one person I've checked off the list out of the other 99 I'm going to reach out to. So that's another thing. And I would say they pace themselves because that takes a certain amount of emotional energy. It's not that easy. I mean, some days you're just having a hard day and one more rejection, you're ready to crawl back under the covers, but they get back up the next day and they look at themselves as lifetime entrepreneurs and lifetime freelancers so that this one day is just a blip on the radar screen and most of their days are pretty productive.
And you know, sometimes you can consistently go in the wrong way. So how to understand that you are going consistently in the right way?
One way is through community. I think one of the great things that we have right now are podcasts and online communities. There are so many free ones on different social media. So finding one or an in-person community, if you can find one, can be a great way to see if you're doing similar things to the other successful people in your field. Because, for instance, a graphic designer and a freelance writer, we might work for the same clients, but how we run our business may need to be different. So you want to, if you're a graphic designer, you want to surround yourself with graphic designers who are ahead of you, right? Not the people that are failing and struggling, but the people who are doing well at it. And you might not have a chance to meet them. So look them up, see if they're on podcasts, see where you can learn from them in whatever forums they are, or connect with them on social media. That's one of the most beautiful things now where you and I connected on social media, right? You had published a list of books and I wrote back to you because it was a valuable list of books. You were putting out valuable content and there were books that I'm looking forward to reading on that list. So that's a way to introduce yourself to people. But you definitely need to learn from people who are doing what you want to do well, and then put your own spin on it, right? Because you don't want to copy them exactly. You have different personality, different gifts, different talents, etc.
I'm always saying to my kid, like, if there was one book about how to become a millionaire or billionaire with a step-by-step explanation, most likely nobody would buy it because they won't believe. And I understand that there is no one size fits all. It's exactly what you are talking about. And you know, that's one of the reasons why I love having this podcast, having this conversation, because when you talk to many, many different people, you hear all those different approaches and you understand how you can find your own approach. And that's exactly what I think you are talking about. When you are meeting different people, you are learning from them, and then you can finally, hopefully, if everything goes well, find your personal way. I'm curious, how did you find your personal journey? How did you decide to become a writer and journalist?
I was lucky in that I always wanted to be a writer. I remember even going back to kindergarten. I was an early reader and I would write stories and I always was, on the school newspaper and that sort of thing. It kind of found me and I realized that isn't always the norm. So I think it's important to put yourself out there and expose yourself to a lot of different experiences because maybe what your gift is isn't something that maybe your parents didn't know about, it wasn't available in your community. And the beauty of the internet is now you can research all kinds of interests that
Yeah.
maybe no one in your immediate circles knows about. And then you can put yourself out into the world and find those experiences. Um, but for me, I kind of built this up over many years where I started out at in college, I was on the school newspaper. I was the arts and entertainment editor for the Yale Daily News. And I thought I wanted to be an arts and entertainment editor in the beginning of my career, but then I found there were other things I was interested in over time. And um, I had some internships in college. I started out at a little newspaper called the Westmore News. It was a little weekly run by a husband and wife team in their community of Portchester, New York. And then the next year I worked for the Hartford Courant, which was a little bigger paper in Hartford, Connecticut. And then I moved to the Los Angeles Times and I was working for the entertainment editor out of the San Diego Bureau. And all of those experiences gave me a little taste of what it was like to be a journalist and did I
Mm,
like it? Um, and then the first 7 years of my career, I worked in small newspapers doing, 3 stories a day. A lot of times I would be sent out on general assignment. At the end of when I was working in newspapers, I covered the city hall of Jersey City. As a reporter, I had covered the Hudson County Jail. And so I got a taste of what the world was like. But I also developed my proficiency by writing a lot and learning interviewing people under all different circumstances. Sometimes I'd be outside in the cold and then the ink was freezing in my pen, and uh,
wow.
it was really trial by fire sometimes because you'd be under pressure to get a story in before the deadline. And this was like it was print journalism, so it was that we didn't have all the technologies we have now. I was very young. And then over time, I kind of burned out on it. I was tired of writing about bad news and I
Mm,
decided to just do something light and fun. And I got a job as a fashion editor at Women's Wear Daily, and I worked for the fashion editor of W and WWD. And I started to feel that was a little too light for me, but I did like the business side of things. I found that was more interesting than I ever realized. And in fact, I remember on a job interview at one point, I said I would never want to cover business. But then I started to realize how business really impacts everything else in the world. It impacts the life in a community, it impacts opportunity, etc. So that's where I found it interesting from more of a social point of view. And I got a job at Success Magazine, where I became a senior editor, and at one point I was acting editor of the whole magazine. Then I moved over to Fortune Small Business Online, and this was over many years. And then finally, I wound up having my daughters, who they're now 21, but they were premature twins, and I could see that they were late in speaking, and they needed some therapies. And I felt that as their mother, I needed to be in the home to take care of those
mm,
things. I had a great job at Fortune Small Business Magazine, and I felt because I was the only senior woman on the staff at that time, I felt like in a way I was representing women on the staff, but I also felt that my children only had one mother, and if I didn't do all of the work that they needed, that their future would not be as good. So I realized I could still do the same work and work with many of the same people as a freelancer. And so that was really how it happened. I needed to find a different way to do my work and combine it with family. And honestly, it was the best decision I ever made because then I went on. I have 4 children now, ages 14 to 21, and I was able to be very available to them while doing work I loved and while working with smart and interesting people on stories that I loved. And I pieced it together day by day. It was very hard when I had 4 children under the age of 6 with no nanny. That was not easy, but I'm glad I did it because it showed me it was possible. And it also helped me to help other people, whether men, women, people have different reasons for wanting to be freelance, but I lived it and I lived the hard parts and I lived the rewards. And so I can speak with some authority about it just from firsthand experience. So that was a long answer. How about that? I'll let you jump in, Yuri.
You know, we have this joke in the freelancing world that now I'm a freelancer and I can work 24/7. So, and I'm curious, like like what is your trick? How did you do this? How did you manage being be a freelancer and growing your business while having 4 children?
Well, I needed to flex my schedule on an almost constant basis. So one thing that I did, and my friend Eileen Zimmerman, who is a successful freelancer, she wrote a book called Smack. She was, I think, about 2 years ahead of me in starting a family. And she told me something that was very valuable, which was that she got up at 5 in the morning every day and she worked from 5 a.m. to 7 a.m. while her children were sleeping so that she could get a big chunk of work done. There's a lot you can get done in 2 hours, especially if you have maybe a half an hour where you did an interview or something like that. So I realized that critical morning time was going to be important, and I needed to make very good use of it. And then I would work when the kids were napping. I realized I couldn't do everything. I wasn't going to have a great social life, going out with friends all the time, and doing certain things I did before I had children, that I had to prioritize my big priorities, my family and my work. And I always felt being physically fit and staying healthy was really important to making the whole thing work, because if I was tired and run down and unhealthy, I wouldn't have the energy to do it all. I tried to surround myself with clients that I really enjoyed as people, so I didn't have a lot of stressful clients. And if
Mm.
I had one that turned out to be that way, who was constantly interfering with my family life, for instance, I I would not work with them anymore. I wouldn't fire them. People say firing a client. I just wouldn't pitch them
Yeah.
anymore. And I would double down on the people that were more compatible with what I wanted. But I did have to set priorities. And I remember at one point, when I had all the kids, I did feel kind of run down, and I started doing yoga. And at that point, I could only do it once a week because I didn't have much time. But I started building up, and I would try to fit in exercise wherever I could, because I have found that that's really critical, not to be glued to the computer all the time, and try to find time for friendships wherever I could, whether they were with other freelancers or other mothers, or, whoever it was. Having those human connections was also important. So it just didn't feel like my whole life was work.
No, I remember from the Million Dollar One Person Business, there are four questions that you propose to ask, like, what can I eliminate? What can I outsource? What can I put on the back burner? And what can I say no to? Like, to prioritize. And, since then, since I've read your book, I'm always using these four questions. But I'm still curious, how do you feel when you have to say no to a client?
I'm very good at it now. It was hard for me initially because in the beginning, when my business was new, I kept feeling like I had to prove myself over and over again. But I think now at this point, I went into business in 2007, and I know my value. I know my strengths and weaknesses. I've tried to really focus in on the areas where I have differentiated myself and avoid areas where other people are better. And when I do projects, I basically know how they should be structured and how they should be done. So if a client is asking me to do something, for instance, that is not in their best interest, I try to be diplomatic and respect their feelings and understand that they're in the same situation I would be if I was hiring a contractor to build a house. I don't
Yeah.
really know all that they know. I know I want a house that looks this way, but I don't really know the process to get there. So I might suggest things or ask things, but ultimately I'm relying on them to guide me and to do it with integrity, not to let me push them into doing it in a way that ultimately will cause the house to fall down. So I feel like I have to uphold that trust too. And part of it is sometimes having those direct conversations and saying, I know you want to do it this way, and I can understand why you do, but here's why I don't think you should do that. Here's why, if you were a member of my family, I would advise against that. Here's some things you need to consider with your professional reputation, for instance, that you might not have thought about, or you want to, I do ghostwriting of books in addition to freelancing. I know you want to put that in a book, but sometimes when you put something out on the internet, you might have the equivalent of buyer's remorse, publisher's remorse. You can't take it back because it's cached. And, if people don't clear the cache on their computer. So you have to think very carefully before you put things out there, even though impulsively you might want to do it, And so I think you build trust over time when you do tell them things that
Mm.
they need to hear, because you're being responsible. At the same time, um, sometimes they have an unrealistic time frame. For instance, it's like they want it done yesterday, and if this is a lot of work and it can't be done, they might walk away and hire somebody else who promises something that really can't be delivered. For instance, with the books, there might be somebody who can deliver a book in 1 month by plagiarizing material on the internet or using ChatGPT to write it. But my types of clients are leading business people, so that type of book would hurt their reputation. It wouldn't be worth doing it that way.
Yeah.
So if they walk away and hire somebody like that, they weren't my client to begin with. But Yuri, this brings us to another point, which is the basis of a successful freelance business is your own personal finances. And I didn't realize this at first, but you need the freedom to walk away. And so what that means is, first of all, you've got to live below your means a little bit. I don't think you have to live in a yurt. You don't have to live on one potato a week. But what you need to do is live about 20% below your means so that you have some savings and that you always have enough that you can get through at least a couple of months if you lost a major client. You need to have diversification in your clients so that if somebody dried up, you're not going to be without income. And you need to always be developing your pipeline so that if something happened and it was catastrophic like COVID, that you have other options, because otherwise you can't have those conversations with your clients that you need to have and that you need to be a really good professional. So I would say that's really, really important, because you'll have fear if you're in scarcity and your family is not going to eat because you said no to a client. Then you're going to say yes,
Mm.
but then you're going to hurt your own reputation. You're not going to get referrals because you said yes to something you really can't do, or you said yes to something that you don't want to put your name on. So keeping your finances in order and learning about it, which I think is like, we're all creatives, right? We don't want to learn about these things. We're not that interested in it, but we have to become interested in it. We have to keep books in our business. Like I use bench accounting. There's a lot of different accounting programs out there. You need to keep books for your business so that you know where you stand. You need to keep your finances, at least, have a reasonably balanced checking account or whatever you use to pay bills. Maybe it's not checking, but whatever you're using, you need to sort of know where you stand and be a CFO of your own life. Spend 5 minutes a day on it, and you'll be in such a different state of mind when you talk to the clients. So what
Mm.
do you do if you're not there? Because that's the obvious question, right? I'm sure a lot of freelancers are like, I'm struggling. I lost my job. I'm doing this unprepared. And you need to do a push, right? To get yourself in that situation where you can. You do a 30-day push where every day you prioritize revenue and you prioritize savings until you have at least a month's rent or mortgage in the bank and some money for food. So at least you can walk away, because you will be such a better professional for it. I know this isn't the advice you expected, but it will change your life as a freelancer.
How can freelancers transition from service-based hourly rates to scalable income streams? Why I'm asking, because that's exactly why many freelancers are afraid of like saying no, because they're still dependent on like their hourly rate. And when they have clients, everything is good. Even they might have some savings, but it's still up to clients. But how to ensure that it's not just up to clients? Like, what can they do?
Well, there's many steps to this, so it's not an overnight thing. I think there's a lot of people out there saying, "Don't trade time for dollars," right? But if in your industry things are based on hourly rates, it's hard to escape that. So this is what I would say is, first, you really need to do the work and become very proficient at what you're doing, because you have no bargaining power. If you're still learning what you do, then you're still learning on your client's dime. So you're not in a position to charge $500 an hour or whatever the ideal would be that would put you in a relaxed state about money and your finances. So do the work. It might involve getting a job, like those newspaper jobs I had where I was writing 3 stories a day. I learned how to interview people where I would have to knock at their door. Somebody just died and the family is inside crying, and I needed to get the story. And so I would have to figure out, well, how do I approach them sensitively? I don't want to be a monster, but this happened in our community. The newspaper needs the story. So I would knock at the door and say, I'm really sorry about what happened. Are you comfortable talking with me? And how would you like this person to be remembered?
Mm,
A lot of times they would invite me in, but that allowed me to learn how to make connections with people on a very heart-based level based on empathy. And now when I'm writing about business, the same thing applies where I don't always have a lot of time with somebody. So that's just one example of a skill that in my field is important, or writing quickly, right? If it takes you all week to write one article, because you're still learning the rudiments of writing, you'll never really maximize your income, but there's no substitute for learning it. You need to view it almost as your own education, and maybe have some other sources of income to give you that luxury of learning. Because once you learn it, that's going to be your armor. That's going to make you different because you will be better than your competitors. But I often have these young writers writing to me saying, they want to get a placement in this magazine or whatever, and they're only 1 year into it. Well, it took a lot of people more time than 1 year, and you have to be in it as a lifetime writer or designer or artist and love the journey of whatever you're doing and love the learning. If you don't love it, I'm not saying there's no frustration. You might be in the wrong niche. It doesn't mean you can't be a freelancer. It means, maybe you should be a web designer and not a writer, or maybe you're not in the right area. But then once you have established more value to your work, what you're bringing is not just the task, you're bringing judgment and you're bringing expertise and authority. And there are a lot of different ways to gain authority. I mean, it could be through social media, like you were putting out some very high quality posts that showed me
mm,
you're really reading a lot of good books and you're a great curator, and you're pointing me to books I have not heard of. So I thought, well, he's knowledgeable, right? He's a knowledgeable reader. He's not just coming up with some laundry list of books. And someone could do that in their own field, right? If they're a tech person, these are the 5 best apps to save a whole business day every week and get your time back. You create value in the marketplace and you signal it to other people. So then when they come to you or you reach out to them, they know you have some expertise, and then you can go to value-based pricing where
mm,
you're not charging, you're not being paid by the hour. You could say, well, I write white papers, and my flat fee for a white paper is $3,000. And what you're getting is not just the actual white paper, but I can advise you on who would be some of the best sources to interview for the paper, or here are the best sources of data, or here, based on the other white papers I've written, here's what has made them most successful in terms of getting sponsorships. So you're helping the person succeed because you know what you're talking about. And then you can go to the flat fee. Now, the other side of it is you can save time, and maybe the white paper that used to take you all week takes you one day because you've become so good at it and so efficient, because now instead of slogging through all your notes manually, you're using ChatGPT and saying, please clean up these notes without changing the wording. Please break this down into short paragraphs. Please extract the key points so I can remember what each person said. So then when you sit down to write, you're so much faster. And instead of doing one white paper a week, you're doing 3. So, and you're doing them at a flat fee. I mean, if you saved all those hours by using ChatGPT on your notes, then you're bringing more time to the creative process. You're massaging the writing, you're making it better. You're still producing a better product for your client. So you can still charge the same amount or maybe even more, because now you're focusing on the right parts of what you do and not the grunt work, that none of us likes to do anyway. I know it's a
So
long answer, but it's a complex process. It's not just like, you push a button like somebody on X might say, right?
yeah, exactly. So you were talking about like sharing your experience, getting new skills, having some financial buffer. And the longest road starts just with one step. So I'm curious, what is one step to take right away for freelancers who feel stuck in this cycle of client work and just don't know what to do? So, from your perspective, what would be one step to grow their business?
I'm a big believer in peer learning. That's why my books are filled with case studies, because we need to learn from people that are like ourselves, I think, in order to figure out how to make things work. In that, I mean, I learned from my friend Eileen Zimmerman when we were both mothers of young children because she had similar constraints. Now, if I could learn something from a male freelancer who has no kids, I'm sure there's a lot I could learn from him. But if he didn't have those same constraints, maybe some of the advice he would give me would not apply in my specific situation logistically. So find people that have similar lives to you, identify them. You can find them on social media, Google search, maybe identify five, and then look up where they're working,
Mm,
right? And look up what types of projects they're doing. You can find so much on the internet, and then ask yourself if you're doing the same types of work that they are, because it could be that I look for people who are a little more successful than yourself. Could be that you're focusing your efforts on the wrong types of projects.
mm,
Like maybe you're writing articles, but you could be writing white papers, and that's what they've sort of shifted into. For instance, learn from what they're doing right. And then the next step would be to figure out how you can, if you're not doing that type of work, how you can learn it. And usually it's from a friendly competitor, to be honest. I mean, in my field, there's a lot of business journalists. We all help each other, right? If we have to learn a new technology, it's hard to take a course on every single thing you need to know. But if you can call a friend and say, can you show me how to do this? The next time they'll be calling you. That's a great way to learn.
That's why I really love community building niche and sphere, and I call it community world because I don't know, but the best experts I've ever met in the community building are so open that you can just invite them to a coffee chat and they'll be happy to help you. I'm like, wow, is it even possible? I cannot imagine someone from sales go and help as much as from community world. So, and I really love those conversations when you can just I don't really like this word pick your brain, but more kind of like exchange experience, I would say, share tips with each other because together we are growing so much faster. And yeah, I totally agree with you. And thank you so much for sharing it. And Elaine, I wish to have the sky as the limit, but time is the limit. So the final question: what is your favorite food?
Sushi. I love sushi.
Welcome to the sushi team. I have two teams. I have sushi and pizza team. So welcome to the sushi team. And yeah, Elaine, thank you so much for sharing your experience. And it's been such a pleasure to hear and learn from you.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much, Yuri. It's been such a pleasure to learn from you too. Thank you so much for all that you do for freelancers. And I can't wait to continue following your podcast.
Hey, and thank you so much for listening. If you like the show, hit the like button, 5 stars, and share it with your friend. That's it. We're done. See you in the next episode.